What's up, family? Okay, so I'm back with another travel tip video for you guys to get you guys ready and prepared for 2025 travel season. So, what they're really not talking about right now that really needs to happen and everybody needs to be aware of is the necessity for all US citizens to get their real ID. Yeah, so I know we've been hearing this real ID thing for several years now. A couple states started years ago trying to implement this process, but the federal government kept extending when states had a deadline in order to have this done. So the new deadline is May 7th, 2025. So all states are going to be required to have, all US citizens must have a real ID by May 7th, 2025. Let's talk about what it means to have a real ID because there's a lot of misconceptions, and I'm starting to find out they really aren't talking about it. I'm going to leave my opinions on why they're not talking about it to myself, but let's get to the why you really need it. So the reality of it is, with a real ID, you will not be, if you don't have a real ID, you will not be able to board any domestic flight in the United States. So it doesn't matter how they used to take other forms of identification. If you have a current ID that's not a real ID, you won't be able to board any domestic flights. So you can have a current driver's license, but it's not a real ID because you didn't go through the process of becoming validated to be a real ID. What the real ID has is this star in the corner. So if you have that star in the corner of your ID from the state that you're from, that's going to give you the implication that it's a real ID. Now, most states where I live at, to get a real ID, I needed to have a valid something that basically validates that I'm a U.S. citizen. So I think you could bring like a bill in your name from your current address. The one thing that trumps everything is this, a passport. So if you actually have a passport already, when you go get your state issue real ID, then you could just take your passport. So this trumps everything, guys. So if you already have your passport, take this when you go to get the real ID. So here's what you can't board domestic flights, federal facilities, which would be like military bases, federal buildings, courthouses, jails, power plants, anywhere that's considered a federal facility, you will not be able to enter unless you have a real ID. Now, again, I don't want to get into the particulars of what this may be about, but the harsh reality of it is a lot of folks really, really need to take some initiative to make sure that they have valid identification in the U.S., period. From what I gathered, the whole point of the real ID is to help the federal government to try to get a hold on immigration. We all know what's going on right now with immigration and with the buzz and blah, blah, blah. Don't get caught up in the matrix of what's going on in the United States because you don't have a real ID. You have the May 7th, 2025. I would suggest don't wait to the last minute because it's going to probably be absolute chaos come April and beginning of May of folks trying to get this real ID. And one last thing, guys. I had a older gentleman to ask me, could he ask me a question? I said, of course. So what he was asking me was he was under the impression that once you got your real ID, that trumps a passport. That is a false narrative. So if you hear that, I don't know where that narrative is coming from. I'm not on TikTok, but I don't know if it's in that world or if it's somewhere on Instagram. But just please let folks know, just because you have gotten the real ID and gone through that process, that's for domestic only. You cannot use your real ID to travel internationally. So you can use your passport to travel domestically, but you cannot use your real ID to travel internationally. I hope that's not confusing. You guys got any questions, hit me up. But please, please, please make sure your friends and families understand that just because they got that real ID, it does not trump having a passport, which would allow you to travel internationally. Okay, so get your real ID, and you can't fly on domestic flights. The only thing that trumps that you'll be able to use at an airport that trumps a real ID will be a passport. So the last time I did a passport video, I was talking about how chaotic it was to get a passport at that time. They have gotten their act together tremendously, y'all. So this is the time to do it. If you don't have your passport, just keep in mind the new passports actually have 2 pictures. No, you cannot smile anymore on your on your passport. I was told that it's very difficult to identify you, whether you are dead or alive, but that's too much information. But yeah, get your passport. It's very easy now. It's automated. You can automate the whole process online and get that done and taken care of. So I highly recommend get your passports, guys. Get your passports for 2025. Go ahead and start that process now. But the real thing, especially if you're gonna be doing a lot of domestic travel and locally, get that real ID. Don't wait to try to figure that out, or just don't say nothing might tell you, because I'm telling y'all now, you're gonna need this real ID. Okay, I'm out.